Hey guys, Jake Brown here for rotocurve.com, and today we're going to be looking at DraftKings and the pursuit of profit. Give me one moment. All right, so what we have on the screen now is DraftKings lobby. We're only going to be looking at NFL today, so have the NFL tab selected up top. What you'll notice is the first contest you see in this lobby, they don't necessarily follow a rhyme or a reason other than having the star next to them, which just designates that they're featured. In most cases, featured will mean a slightly higher rake if they fill, but in many cases it looks like DraftKings is promoting the contest. They're slightly more worried about filling. So you have, a very big $300 tournament this week. So that's up here. You actually have single entry has made its way in some cases. There you go, a 38,000 person $3 single entry. So they have that up here as well. So that's all the star means. You don't have, these aren't better contests. In many cases, they actually are worse contests if there is an overlay. And that's something we'll look at right off the bat because I've had so many questions about overlay, and it doesn't really warrant an entire article, though I'll do a brief summary of it at some point in the future, I'm sure. Let's look at this $25 double up. So what I look at on DraftKings for contests, I look at two things. I look at the actual overlay, which I'll show you how to calculate in a second. And then I look at, the point where overlay dies, I guess the break-even point for the site running the contest. The way you do that is very, very simple. You take the prizes. So in this case, $1 million. You take the cost to buy in, $25. Divide the first by the second, and you get 40,000. And that's how many entries it takes to fill this prize pool, or how many entries it gets to fill this prize pool to $1 million. And if there were exactly 40,000 entries, DraftKings would make $0 and you would be raked 0%. So I just like to do that because it's a very quick calculation, just taking the prize pool divided by entry fee, finding the break-even point, and using that to kind of determine where I think overlay will fall, rather than knowing the overlay percentage off the bat of a full contest. While that is relevant, you're in the industry now with so many sites, you're really looking for contests that do have some overlay. And if you are playing so extended the way I am, where you're on multiple sites and you're forced to kind of play on DraftKings, you're just looking for your best situations with the least rake when it's filled. The way you do that is you take the entry fees, $25, multiply it by the total entries, which is 45,200. So 45,200 times $25 in the entry fees. What you get is 1,130,000. If you notice, the prize pool was 1 million. So you could look at that and say that the rake is 130,000. And you're dividing that, and here's the slightly contentious point. Theoretically, you're dividing that by 1,130,000 because that's what the site took in, and this is what they're taking out of the prize pool. Now, some people think that you should be using the prize pool here, and while that may be a better apt analogy for other industries, I think this is the way it's done for this. So this is kind of how as long as you're doing it equally on every site, it shouldn't make too much of a difference, though the percentages will just be slightly lower in this case. But you do the math and you get, something between 10 and 13.5% for every contest. And in this case, it's 11.5. And again, this is a cash game, a double up. So, you see why I hate them so much. Not to mention this is a 500 multi-entry double up. But yeah, 11.5% rake, you're normally paying 10. So I don't really mess around with those. That was just a quick rake guide. The head-to-head cash game selection on DraftKings has changed recently, and this may seem similar to the lobby video that I did earlier. One thing that DraftKings has very clearly organized up top is all of the slates available. So in this case, you have a Thursday lock, a Sunday lock without Sunday night's game, and then a just 1 p.m. Sunday. So certainly plenty of slates to play if you want. I usually will make a dummy lineup for Thursday as soon as it's announced, and a dummy lineup for the full slate Sunday as soon as it's announced. And then my process is basically to set alarms for periods of the day on days of the week that I've, in a short season so far found to be more successful in sniping opponents, because there's less ways for users to really use computers or extensions, as you saw on FanDuel, to interact and quickly scoop up and locate the softest players among a range of prices. One nice thing that they've done with this new lobby update is you can only look at one price range at a time. So you can't put out, let's say, 25 to 50 head to head on FanDuel and scroll down, through the 50s, through the 25s real quickly looking for green. And I'll show you what I mean. In this case, Thursday Night Lock, $20. You hit view, you see a bunch of names. So if I select one of these names and then I want to play in a different price range, I have to switch that price range. And again, like 10:13 a.m. on, supposed free money Tuesday, but sites paid out late last night, so not as many people jumped in late. I did snipe a bit there, and you're looking for people with 0x next to their name and just a single entry, but you won't always find them. One thing you can do is you can highlight the person's name. You can copy and paste it over to RotoGrinders and search for them and see if they're tracked. But in many cases, that can mess with you, as people who aren't tracked aren't necessarily worse. In many cases, some really good players have stopped becoming tracked and elected for that, so that people can't take advantage of that. So unless you look on there and find that someone is new, them not being on there shouldn't be an indictment of their playing abilities. So I'll check over to Sunday, which seems to have a little bit more. And there we go. We got one. And how quick it is, you have a dummy lineup in there, pops up, and then you can just click back and be on your way. There's another one. And again, no disrespect to these people, but if you're only playing one, I am of the belief that there's more in a small likelihood that you are a softer game than people who have 20 or 40 or 5. So that's pretty much how I go. Like I said, how I go about my head-to-heads is on Tuesdays, I'll usually have an alarm for 2:30 a.m. or 3 a.m. if I'm planning on being asleep, because there are people that as soon as it pays out will jump in. Last week I was actually able to get a couple of 109s from people who, based on their lineup selection, also clearly didn't know quite how to approach cash games, but were tilting and wanted to get their money right back on the site. So what I try to do is about 2:30 a.m., try to do it again about 8 a.m., try to do it again about 11 a.m. And I understand that most people won't have time for this, but to maximize your ability to profit, it's not sitting on the site for a long time, making lineups necessarily be, even more than a day before your contest starts. If you're having time to log on and off the site multiple times in the week, you really should be checking in the head-to-head lobby every time you log in. And if I will summarize and put some findings on more optimal times to be searching for opponents. But game selection is, the biggest edge, I think, for someone who really knows what they're doing, because in many cases, the edge industry-wide is shrinking. Great information out there. And you're going to see a lot of similar lineups on a regular basis. Now, that the folks at ESPN still put out some pretty questionable things on air, and that's to our benefit. But in general, people who lose aren't comfortable continuing to lose without improving. So you got to really maximize your ability to find opponents that you've never seen before. And I'll knock this out. And as you see, like I said, I don't have a dummy for these slates, but there are tons of people who have already signed up for contests and all of these. And like I said, only one price at a time, which is a big difference. And you can't click on anyone to find out how many wins they have. So I find head-to-head game selection on DraftKings to be incredibly less frustrating in terms of people sniping something out from under you, with the whole Roto Grinders extension being green and highlighting new players. You actually cannot, here, I should have shown that, you cannot take 2 games from the same opponent, and you actually can't. So look at this guy, he has 2. I hit play, take 1, go back. Still says 2, which is something that doesn't update very quickly. Even if I refresh this entire page, it would still say 2 for maybe a minute or so. But if I hit play again and try to enter, oh, in this case, that's a horrible example because this user has not set up something that I will show you in a moment. So I did just take 2 of their games and feel like a chump. We'll try this guy with 4. Take 1 of his games, and it also keeps track of how many games you've taken in this little session before you back out. Try to take a second one of his games. All right, sorry, your entry failed. You have reached the limit for the amount of times you can play this user. What that's about is if you're going to create a contest, say NFL, full Sunday slate, public. And here we go, we'll put 10 ones. And we'll go 9. 10's that's a personal bend. I go 4 or 9. 5 and 10 seem like more legitimate numbers, but that's all in my head. So I'll put out, $162. And I don't want someone to be able to, if this were FanDuel, you'd have 2 or 3 users scooping up most of this action. Here you can decide how you want to break that up. If you're playing 2 cash game lineups, you may be fine. I usually use 1 or 2 in terms of limits, and that's how many times people can take your games in each of these price ranges. And if you take 2, not that everyone is going to take 2, as you saw, I was pretty surprised that that guy had not limited. But some people will do 2, and I've messed around with that and made 2 lineups and tried to see if people were taking 2 of my games. I didn't find that 2 was much more worthwhile than 3 or 4, so I just tend to keep it on 1. And that's how you make sure you're not getting all your game scoops. So there's no extension on DraftKings. There's no way for them to click on your name and see a past history of wins. So it's a more ideal place to play your head-to-heads, in my opinion. Now, the flip side of that is FanDuel matches you up. And some are actually suspicious that they're matching you up before lineup lock. As a result of, if you ever go through your contest page on FanDuel, you'll now notice that not every head-to-head you're playing in, even if you've just sniped head-to-heads, not created any, all of them won't necessarily have a username to the left of them. They might just say head-to-head, which seems really, really strange to have some and not the other. But I'll digress back to DraftKings. Something I mentioned in the lobby video, if you click on below your username where your balance is, and then move over to preferences, and see 2 tools that are able to be used by you. External tracking is to be, it says submit my game results to fantasy sports player ranking sites. Basically, submit my game results to Roto Grinders. There are no other sites, and this is a somewhat contentious thing. No other sites have been granted the right to have the data to rank players. So the idea here is it is somewhat of an ego thing to be tracked, and there's no other way around it. It would be a little bit of an edge for me, if I'm being honest, to probably unclick that, not show up as someone who has much experience, and have more people take my games once and have more positive game selection on games I post. But that's about as much ego as I allow myself to indulge. But yeah, if you really want to play with every edge possible, unclick that. Here you can block users. These are users, as it says right above, that can no longer join your public or private head-to-heads, send you head-to-heads, or be auto-matched with you. So in this case, you can, search, or no, I don't believe search, but you can type in any user, right? We'll go with the guys that might gush over, or just the bigger names of high dollars. So you can just block them if you want. And give me 1 sec. Oh. I had someone, that's strange. Millionaire makers for golf is what's showing up. Never mind. Saying there's someone who always sends me games, and it's very, very annoying So that's the other thing you can do, is you can block someone for that reason, but it doesn't make sense to not have any blocks. Yeah, well, there you go. We'll block 1/3 of the team. Using your preferences menu. I mean, if you want to show up on rotor grinders, that's how you will. If you don't and you want to seek every edge, unclick that. If you want to block people, do it here. I mean, it would probably not be an intelligent move to block someone specifically for the reason of them, excuse me, spamming you invites. Try to just find them and send them an email, or DraftKings an email, and hopefully that will work, because you shouldn't have to do that. But then we'll move on to something I was gushing over on FanDuel, and it's still pretty good over here, and that's single entry availability. One thing you can do is use this text box to type in the word single, that's INGLE, and you will see all of the single entries. You can then search by slate, and you'll notice there are no single entries for the kind of fake slates, and but there's some pretty damn good single entry over here. One thing I noticed that was slightly disappointing is I've had a little personal success in this $50 single entry on each of the sites. On FanDuel, that was 1,123 people, and then it jumped this week to 1,348. On DraftKings this past week, week 4, it had 889 entry spots. It did not fill, and as a result, they overreacted and cut it down to 555. So for this week, the FanDuel one is more than 2 times larger at 1,348 versus 555 in the DraftKings single entry GPP. Doesn't hold true for everything across the board. As you see, the 100 is pretty damn close to the 50, despite that ratio not being the same from 50 to 27. But it is true that all of the single entries on DraftKings are smaller than the single entries on FanDuel. So you can approach that in 2 ways. Less contrarian strategy to a point needed on DraftKings. Again, it's still about the actual number and less about the site. So if the DraftKings $9 is the same size as the FanDuel $20 or $25, then you play them the same way. It's not about the dollar value, but there are less instances to play smaller fields in single entry on FanDuel. And as a result, the prize pools are significantly bigger. I mean, this is a $25,000 prize pool. And on FanDuel, that number is what? Trying to do some math, but it's not working out in the head. 12,500 times 50. It's about somewhere between 60 and 80,000. Haven't checked on the rake, but again, single entry is the way to go. As you can see, you can spend 150, 177. 186, 191, 192, $192. Playing these single entries at 100 and below. And as discussed in the FanDuel video, if you're really playing by a standard bankroll management of 90-10, and that's 10% of your overall bankroll, you're only playing 1% of your overall bankroll in GPPs. What that means is if you have $10,000 in your bankroll, you are only playing $100 in GPPs. And that's with the standard bankroll management, which I won't get into this video, but look for an article coming out next week. Speaking of standardization, that's the other thing that's kind of very, very tough on DraftKings compared to FanDuel. It's one of the only things that I have always appreciated about FanDuel is their tournament sizing stays fairly consistent. You can look at a 16-month or 17-week NFL season, and if you look at your results in a certain level of contest, more than 50% of the time, it's actually going to have the exact same amount of entries. There are things to be said, positive and negative, for a site being more or less dynamic on these things, but what it means to me is, I track rake, I track break-even points for entry filling for contests, as I showed earlier. On DraftKings, I find myself having to do that more often because things change so much. Even double ups, you don't get the exact same standard double ups each week, even the featured contests. I believe this $3 has stayed the same. I like that 38.3 number. And there are other instances where you have numbers. I believe 555 was a point for the 100 for a while, but just kind of be cognizant of it. Make sure to do your math each day. You can check out, I believe it's, let me say, dailyfantasysuperlobby.com if you want to, and that's probably butchered, if you want a rake percentage type tracker. But I prefer to just, find that break-even point by myself. Sometimes you don't need the calculator. 40,000, $100, 400 entries. So there, anything 401 creates rake. 399 overlay. That's all people mean when they say the words. Over here on the left, you'll see the different categories to sort by. Oh, and a mistake I sometimes make, and try not to do this, is if you have anything in here like single, obviously satellites and qualifiers won't show up. No, they should, DraftKings. They should be single entry like everything else in the industry. But very easy to just go through. Again, you have G as your guaranteed. Slightly easier to kind of see than the FanDuel orange and blue dots, but again, head-to-heads are never going to be guaranteed. 50-50s will to some extent. You also have at the bottom, you have a lot of user-created contests. There is some value in these. I still see, for what it's worth, Condi is still manually by hand going through, $2, $5, $10 created leagues by people. So there are people that take the time, but it's not as many as will be in the normal ones. So kind of looking down in that range. The other thing is leagues. Let's go to the Sunday slate. The one thing that I wasn't too fond of that DraftKings did was include leagues with tournaments in this. You can't really sort by anything other than, I guess, entries and going in reverse order. So what you're going to want to do is actually narrow it down to the field size using these tools that you want. So if you're looking for a smaller, say 3 to 5 player single entry league, that's what you can do. I do like using leagues, and I didn't speak about this on DraftKings or on FanDuel, but I do like using leagues almost in a GPP-esque way. A league payout, if you win the league, is going to be, in this case, it's a small league, $45 for the prize pool. You get 1.5x for coming in second, which is the 40th percentile of the prize pool, if you will, where you wouldn't be paid elsewhere, and you get 3x for first out of 5. It's a little bit boom busty. I really don't mind it. As you saw, you can just click on the dollar value and see the people who have entered. And if you want to gauge it that way, you can. And again, I try to never be the first person or even the second in a 5-man. If you have 3 people, you can kind of have an idea, because you will become the 4th, and then there's only room for 1. So if you feel there's only 1 name you recognize, might not be the worst thing to jump in. And you can also sort by entries, 5 by 3. But yeah, I kind of scroll through this often and look for 4 out of 5s. Now, this is a $1. I don't normally jump it. It's a $1. But again, if you're playing it, if you're looking to just grind your bankroll and you see 4 names that you've never seen anywhere else before, and you're getting more than 3x for your top prize, I believe in that one, right? Yep, 3.15. So yeah, if you're, count that as a half GPP, half cash game, if you will. Again, paying out 40% if it's paying top 2 is still worse than double ups, which are fringe cash games to me anyway, though these contests, unlike double ups, are always raked at the standard 10%. And I believe there are some juicier versions of these. It's not all just filling up in the low dollar. And as I say that, let's see that. Okay. You can also do, I don't really approve of these, but this is an interesting way to hedge. I've seen a lot of people doing this. And if you're a beginner, it's not a bad idea. What this is this is a 3-man league that someone created that they decided the top 2 people will win. And a lot of times I'll see this for 5-man leagues where the top 3 win and third place is just break even, or 3-man leagues where the top 2 win. And that's not something that exists on FanDuel. I believe it's only an option on DraftKings. And you're basically you have to win money, but you're hedging. As if you come in second, you're losing less than 20% of your entry fee. If you win, you aren't quite 2xing, you're almost 19xing, just under. But interesting format for cautious players, if you can find them. There's not a very easy way to sort by that. Again, utilize the, I guess, maybe I'm wrong. You type in top 2 win while you have these other parameters up so that you don't get larger fields with a top 2 win or top 3, like 2 out of 10. You can find that, hey, look, there's a good deal of contests here, and they don't have anyone I know in them. And in this case, if it's out of 5, you're looking at 3 and better than 3x, and you're looking at making money in second place. If it's out of, let's see, I haven't seen a 4, but if it's out of 4, you're looking at 2.5x for first and making a sliver, making the rake, so to speak, for second. And as we showed you, if it's 3, you're losing money for second, but it's less than 20%. You're winning money for first, but it's slightly under 1.9. But yeah, I mean, I'm learning right along you guys. Top 2 win, type it in. If this is a format or something that interests you, there might not be tons, but right here you can put up $45 worth of action. These I would consider cash games if you're talking about paying out 2 of 3. 2 of 5, again, not quite. 2 of 4, yeah, it's a 50-50. And they actually exist for every slate. So if that's something that interests you, I know some players out there might kind of scoff at this and say, oh, why the heck would I do that? But again, it's about figuring out how to squeeze out a profit. And in this case, you're looking at 40% of the prize pool profiting and the top 20% 3xing. So it's not actually a horrible idea. And I may be tempted to actually click on that right now. So if you want to come in, come join us. But the leagues on DraftKings allowing for users to create top 2 win in situations of small fields, something that doesn't necessarily exist everywhere else. So we've gone through the head-to-head lobby, gone through the tournaments and leagues, gone through 50-50s a little bit. And anyone who's followed me or read any of my work on Moto Curve should be aware that I'm not a huge fan of double ups. Again, don't be dumb like me and make sure you have all your queries cleared so that you can see everything when you click on one of these tabs. Well, we'll take a look at small range of 50-50 double ups for Sunday. Again, you saw that 11.5% on the 25, 10, got a 50. I have not checked the rake. Let me give them a quick, well, mess this up. There we go. So it's just superlobby.com. And I've liked these guys. They're very, very nice guys. Click on DraftKings if you want. That's something worth talking to them about. Let's see. It does not appear that they track double ups. Well, sorry for that. What a good site to use for rake. Just make sure, I haven't been familiar with it since the update, so make sure you're aware of all the sliding tools. But again, double ups, typically 11 to 12% rake, 50-50s, always 10% rake. And as I showed you in the leagues, you can kind of find, standard rake on slightly more upside than 1.8x for coming in the top 20% to 50%. So unless there's anything else, I'll just take a look over at the multipliers. This is kind of where I look for overlay, though. On DraftKings, I can honestly tell you for their guaranteed contests, their overlays, other than single entry, is fairly non-existent, except for when they try to push out something big and new. The $300, probably, that $300 we were looking at earlier, which I can't see because I keep making the same mistake, has 3,000 entries to go. So this is one where you're probably not going to get full rake, meaning that it won't fill to 31.45, but it will fill, again, 850,000 divided, 850,000 divided by 300. My calculator just doesn't want to work today. but it's 2,833. So that would be the mark to write down on your Excel sheet or your piece of paper you're writing on, or however you're keeping track of what you're doing. At 2,833, and the third entries, their overlay ceases to exist in this blitz contest. But looking for new contests are pretty much the only way, short of what I've had small success, not as much as FanDuel, is going to things like triple ups, quintuple ups, guaranteed contests, usually sorting by entries, seeing where the big ones are when it gets closer to lock. So, on Thursday night at 8:15 p.m. when everything's set and you're not changing anything with 10 minutes to lock ever on Thursday lock, because it should just be that game. On DraftKings specifically, where your other players not playing in that game on your roster are irrelevant. Look in and see the overlay in some of these. There's still, I don't believe, let me check this very quickly. I don't believe there's a way to just say search for guaranteed. Or there is. Sorry, I take that back. I'm learning a lot alongside you guys today. So now you just have the guaranteed contest. They've made it easier than FanDuel for those purposes. And you can create your ranges as you will. And just wait till that clock ticks down. And again, scripting exists. It shouldn't, but it does. And on DraftKings, it exists much more, in my belief, than FanDuel in terms of late lineup entry because of late game swap. So you can create 30 of the same lineup with 3 players in your core playing at 1 p.m. with 2 players at Thursday or 1 player on Thursday. Whatever your core is for the initial lock, you can duplicate that lineup like 150 times, 500 times, whatever it will allow, and you can still edit beyond that point. FanDuel, you have to be scripting unique lineups. You can't kind of just save time by dumping in different 1 p.m. guys and adjusting further with or without a script from there. So I tend to look at multipliers because they get left out, and they tend to fall below these tournaments and leagues and 50-50s in the main lobby when you're just searching by all. But again, I haven't been overly successful finding overlay on DraftKings in anything short of a single entry. I think that about does it. I believe just like on FanDuel, you can search for individual users' names, but let me double check that before I say something that isn't true. So here we have mweaver160. I don't know who that is. Take their game. Now I want to know if I type in mweaver. Okay, so and just for yucks, DAUT44. You cannot search and find and snipe users by finding them in one price range, jumping over, searching for them, selecting all their games like you can on FanDuel. So I guess in summation, DraftKings, you're more protected as a cash game player. You can set entry limits. You can block 3 users entirely. And as the industry grows, perhaps that'll jump to 5 users entirely. You can't search for users using the search tab. You can't use extensions to find out who is a weaker opponent. And you can't even click on an opponent to find out how many wins they have on the site. So the only real edge in terms of opponent selection that you can have is an understanding of actually just logging in and being in this enough, maybe using roto grinders a couple times to figure out and keep track of which players play often and which don't, who you think is talented, who isn't. And again, if you want to, and this is something I did a while ago, but now that I'm in this lobby every day, I feel less of a need, is take an hour and go through all of the names and go through all of your results in head-to-head and make a little Excel or Google Sheets document, or a spreadsheet rather, and highlight the different players that you think are, extreme sharks, guys that would beat you against the rake, guys that you might be able to beat against the rake, and guys that you really want to play a million times in the world. And kind of as you keep coming into the lobby, you'll see names. When you see new names, if you become more comfortable, you'll start just taking them. But you may also be able to find names that you've beaten in the past or think have made some really egregious game or lineup selections in the past. So that's one route to go. The other route to go, and I'm not 100% sure how to do this, as I haven't done it in the past. Bummer. There's some easy way to, probably here. Private, duh. Aha. Oh, so we'll put the guy. Yeah. So let's do this. Private, $1. And can you send a message? Please stop sending me game requests. So we won't waste a block on this guy. We'll send him a $1 contest and say, please stop sending me game requests. But as you see, you can send games to individual people. So if you've been taxing someone or waxing someone and just stealing their money, you got to remember that not everyone playing this game is playing it purely as a skill game, or more importantly, playing it purely for profit. So if you find someone who's tilted about losing to you and you think isn't any good, you should be sending them games every week, upping the stakes if need be. And that's how you do that. LOL. What a joke. All right, and that's going to do it today for RotoCurve. I'm Jake Brown. Best of luck, and keep them sharp.